Rural Oregon night shifts exist in a kind of vacuum. At a 24-hour laundromat miles from the nearest highway, the darkness outside feels absolute. You learn very quickly how to survive the graveyard hours. The primary rule is simple: ignore the transients and insomniacs drifting in and out. You keep your head down and wipe the counters. At 3 in the morning, the standard rules of social engagement are suspended. It's an unmoored state where eye contact feels like an intrusion, and the heavy silence is rarely broken by anything other than the hum of a dryer. Because of that, you adopt complete passivity. No matter how strange someone's behavior gets, you observe, you stay quiet, and you absolutely never interfere. That baseline shattered when I started tracking one specific customer. Every single night, right as the clock hits 3 a.m., the front door chimes and the same woman walks in. Her walk from the entrance to the back of the store never varies. Exactly 22 steps, measured and rigid, looking neither left nor right. Sitting inside her yellow plastic basket is the exact same load of clothes: a faded denim jacket, 2 plain gray shirts, and 3 pairs of heavy work pants. Every night. A quirky regular might wash clothes twice a week, but a person executing an identical to-the-second physical sequence 7 days a week crosses a line. She becomes a measurable statistical anomaly. To understand what was happening, I began treating her visits as a closed system, isolating each part of her routine. The first variable is location. Even if the entire facility is empty, she bypasses the 30 machines near the entrance and walks directly to a single specific unit isolated in the far back corner. Next are her inputs. Without pausing to read the dials, she sets the machine to cold wash, heavy soil, exactly 45 minutes. Then comes the third variable. While the drum spins, she doesn't read a magazine, she doesn't look at a phone, and she doesn't sit down. She stands perfectly motionless, facing the glass, until the cycle ends. Human beings naturally display variance. We fidget, we choose a closer machine, we change our minds. When human behavior perfectly mirrors an automated, closed loop, it has to be viewed as an engineered process with a specific, unknown purpose. But the most disturbing variable is the timeline. She has performed this sequence every night for 6 years. That equals roughly 2,190 consecutive nights. At 45 minutes a wash, she has spent over 1,600 hours simply standing perfectly still in front of that specific machine in the back corner. This graph maps the standard degradation rate of heavy cotton over time. Notice how the line hits 0, representing total structural failure, around wash 300. You physically cannot agitate a denim jacket 2,000 times with the fabric completely disintegrating. I found myself staring at her basket as she left, straining my eyes to spot a frayed collar or a torn sleeve. But the clothes always emerged completely pristine. These garments have survived 7 times their theoretical material lifespan. Finding them without a single loose thread indicates that the standard laws of friction and wear are being bypassed inside that specific drum. All of this brings us to last week, when the pressure of knowing the numbers finally outweighed my instinct to stay quiet. Her cycle ended. She pulled the wet, perfect clothes from the drum, placed them in her yellow basket, and walked out the door without a glance back. For the first time in 6 years, the machine sat unguarded. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. I picked up my master keys, stepped out from behind the counter, and walked the length of the silent store toward the back corner. Crossing that linoleum floor felt like crossing a border. I was giving up my safety as a passive observer to force an answer. I reached the machine. The metal casing was still cold, vibrating faintly from the final spin cycle. I gripped the handle, pulled upward, and looked inside. There was no agitator. There was no metal bottom. It was an endless, geometric drop into absolute darkness, perfectly contained within a 3-foot steel box. The 6-year cycle of scrubbing and spinning served a purpose far beyond hygiene. She had been maintaining that void, feeding the darkness an offering of pristine cotton to keep the geometry stable. I closed the lid. Now, I still work the night shift. I wipe down the counters, I listen to the door chime, and I sit in a room with a tear in reality disguised as an appliance. People complain about the boredom of dead-end jobs and repetitive lives, but the real terror of a mindless, repetitive routine is how perfectly it can camouflage a complete collapse of logic. For 2 years, Trevor Miles has worked the graveyard shift at a laundromat off Highway 138 in rural Oregon. Between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m., the building is a solitary island of fluorescent light in the middle of the dark pines. The clientele is sparse and predictable. Usually it's just long-haul truckers or local insomniacs, people who move through the night with their own quiet, repeating patterns. But 4 months into the job, Trevor noticed a customer who didn't fit the usual mold, sat in the same plastic chair by the window, and never touched the dryers. Once the wash ended, she simply folded her wet clothes and walked back out into the night. Trevor eventually stopped questioning the behavior. In a place this isolated, a routine becomes its own explanation. As long as she arrived on time and minded her business, she was just another part of the night. The first sign of trouble was the clothing itself. Trevor realized the basket was filled with items no one wore anymore: a floral dress from another era, heavy denim child's overalls, and an old work shirt with a vintage name patch. Last Tuesday, the pattern broke. Halfway through the wash, the woman stood up, looked directly at Trevor for the first time in months, and walked out. She left the machine running and her basket sitting empty on the table. Trevor waited, but she didn't return. Eventually, curiosity pulled him over to machine 12, while the soapy water was still sloshing against the glass. Inside, tumbling around among the vintage dresses and the old work shirts, was a single small child's shoe. Trevor ran to the door, but the parking lot was empty. Looking at the gravel, he realized he couldn't actually remember ever hearing a car pull up or a door slam during her nightly visits. When the timer hit 0, Trevor opened the door to retrieve the shoe. The drum was empty. Not only were the clothes gone, but the interior of the machine was bone dry, as if it hadn't held a drop of water in years. Trevor spent the rest of his shift staring at the empty machine. The physical reality of the laundromat had remained consistent for 2 years, and now it had produced something impossible. Instead of going home to sleep, Trevor went to the local library. He spent 2 hours scrolling through digitized microfiche, looking for any record of a woman matching the blue cardigan. He found an article from 34 years ago. It detailed a house fire that broke out just 4 miles down Highway 138, the same road that runs past the laundromat. The mother and her 6-year-old son died in the blaze. The father was the only survivor, though he suffered severe burns trying to reach them. The fire had occurred at a property Trevor drove past every single morning on his way home, anchoring the woman in the laundromat to a specific physical ruin. The article mentioned that the father spent the rest of his life at that same address, refusing to leave the site of the tragedy. The father survived, badly burned, and reportedly spent the rest of his life obsessively rewashing the family's clothes that had survived the fire, convinced the smoke smell would eventually come out if he just kept trying. He died alone in that house over a decade later, still trying to clean clothes for a family that wasn't there to wear them. Trevor looked at the photo accompanying the article. The mother was standing in the yard wearing the blue cardigan and the floral dress. Beside her, the boy wore the denim overalls and the small, worn shoes. The father's ritual outlived him. The 3 a.m. wash cycle wasn't an act of haunting, it was a mechanical repetition of a man's final, desperate attempt to fix what the fire had destroyed. Trevor returned to work the next night to find Machine 12 marked out of service. A repair technician had checked the unit and found nothing wrong with the motor or the pipes. He told the owner the machine was in perfect condition, then he flatly refused to turn the power back on. Trevor now spends his 3 a.m. hours in the back room, inventorying detergent, or cleaning the water heater, anything to avoid the front of the shop. He hopes that by keeping the machine dark and staying out of sight, he can simply wait for the cycle to exhaust itself. But 2 nights ago, the door chime rang at exactly 3 a.m. Trevor stayed in the back, listening, until the sound of water rushing into a basin forced him to look. Machine 12 was running, spinning and sloshing with a full load of water, even though the power cord was still lying on the floor, unplugged. The woman in the blue cardigan was gone. Her seat by the window was empty, but sitting in the plastic chair, perfectly still as the machine rattled beside him, was the 6-year-old boy. The routine Trevor had watched for months had been stripped away. There was no more folding of clothes and no more quiet exits, just the boy, waiting in the fluorescent light for a cycle that wouldn't end.